Good afternoon, everyone. I believe Sally's just going to start things off. Possibly just give another minute or two just for people who haven't yet managed to join us, and then get Sally to start.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience. And those that were on at 3:15 will have seen me addressing my makeup to make sure I looked okay. So apologies for that. I didn't realise we had people on there already. Welcome to Carthy Accountants' first ever webinar. I'm delighted to learn that we've got so many people on the call or webinar, whatever we want to call it. Really important to get this message out to you and to as many people as possible. We're anticipating the webinar will last probably about 35 minutes from a formal presentation point of view, and then there is an opportunity for people to ask questions and have those answered by not just Laura, but also we have a number of our senior accountants also on hand to be able to respond to those. And what we hope by the end of the webinar is that you will have a little bit more information than you had before. I think it's fair to say we're still limited on what is available and what is out there, but we want to give you as much as we can. So first of all, by way of introduction, I'm Sally Carthy. I'm one of the directors of Carthy Accountants, and I have the unenviable task of being married to Rupert for many years. And I first of all want to give a very sincere apology. I'm sure many of you will have expected Rupert to be on this call. Unfortunately, Rupert has been quite poorly over the last week, just over a week, and is still not very well at all. And so therefore, although he will be somewhere in the background of this call, I'm afraid he's not in a fit state to actually take any active part. So that brings me on to the introduction of Laura, who, although her name is Sant, she's actually Laura Carthy to us. She is our daughter, and she's going to be doing the formal presentation. And as I say, at the end of that, there will be an opportunity for question and answers, both to Laura and other members of the team. So with that said, I'm going to be coming back to you at the end of the formal presentation, and I'll marshal all the questions that come in. The way that you would pose a question is there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, which I think Laura is going to refer you to. My technical skills are slightly limited. And if you type a question in there, I will be able to see them and then direct them at the end of the presentation to the relevant member of the team to respond to. So with that, over to you, Laura.
Thanks very much, Sally. Can you just confirm before you mute yourself or before I mute you that you can hear me?
Yes.
Lovely. Are you going to mute yourself?
I will if I can. Yes, I think I can. Yes.
Lovely. And swiftly and smoothly we shall move on to the next bit. So thank you ever so much, Sally, for the introduction, and thank you ever so much to everybody else for making the time to attend today. I just wanted to confirm before we move any further, and I am not going to be offended if anybody chooses to leave the webinar at this particular stage, but we are running 2 webinars over the course of today and tomorrow for those who are self-employed. Tomorrow's webinar is the one for the directors of limited companies, and there will be some overlap between the 2 webinars anyway. But this particular webinar is focused for those who are sole traders and partnerships. So those who HMRC and the government seem to consider as self-employed. We won't be focusing particularly on the directors. So if you are hoping to get more information, I would about in that regards, I would suggest focusing on tomorrow's webinar. In terms of if you do have questions, I believe the bar is along the bottom. On my screen it's at the top, but I believe everybody else's it's at the bottom. I would suggest, if at all possible, to make questions, and if you have questions that you'd like addressing at the end, please send them through the Q&A box that's at the bottom. There is also the chat facility, and that chat facility, if you kind of do undertake the chat, I think it will go through to all panelists, and those of us that are answering the questions will be answering, will be able to see that. Me personally, I'm going to focus on the presentation for the next 30 minutes or so I won't be paying any attention to that, and I hope Sally will just advise me if there's anything that I do need to pay attention to. For those of you who are unsure, I have muted you all so that I can talk without getting distracted, which is very easy to do. As Sally's mentioned, this is the very first webinar that we have ever done, so please do bear with me if anything does go wrong technologically. As all our clients will be aware, we've got a number of people in our team who are very competent in terms of technology. Unfortunately, those who have or have had the surname Carthy at any point in time do not belong to that, so there is something that could go wrong. And also, obviously, we are in lockdown at the moment. My husband, bless him, has taken our 2 children outside. I don't know if he's really going to keep them out for the full 45 minutes, and therefore there is a slight possibility we might get distracted or interrupted, and I apologise for that if that happens. So without further ado, moving on to the agenda for today, she says, failing miserably, there we go. So in terms of today's agenda, our main focus is going to be to cover the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, which the government announced on Thursday. And from that perspective, we will be looking at the eligibility of people to claim through this scheme, and how it's going to work as far as we understand it. It's worth pointing out at this stage, because it was only announced on Thursday, there's only really skeleton information available at this time, and there's quite a lot that we do not know. So I think it's very prudent to mention during this particular webinar what we don't know. For those people who aren't eligible for this particular scheme, we'll also talk through the other government support that is available, and also if it's something that's cash flow wise you're going to need additional support. And then we'll move on to talk a bit about how we can help. As accountants, or from us, we are a business, and we're only going to be able to keep ourselves running if we have clients that are going to come out the other side of this stronger. And as a result, we want to help wherever we can. And as Sally's already mentioned, we will do a question and answer session at the end. So in terms of the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, and in terms of eligibility, as I mentioned at the start, this is a scheme that is available to those who the government have deemed to be self-employed. And from that perspective, we are looking at sole traders and partnerships. So people who have filled in their self-employment, the short self-employment, or the partnerships or short partnership pages on your tax return, not directors of limited companies. You need to have been trading since at least the 2018-19 tax year, and this has to have been recorded by way of a tax return. Now, for those people, and I don't believe there's any clients that this particularly applies to, certainly not those that are on the webinar, if you haven't filed a tax return for the 2018-19 tax year, but you should have done, the government did say that there would be a 4-week window to get your records up to date. So they've effectively given up until the 23rd of April to file a tax return. The majority of your income needs to have come from self-employment. And what that means from HMRC's perspective is that over 50% of your income, your total taxable income that is showing on your tax calculation, is in relation to self-employment. What that generally means is that if you're mostly self-employed, but maybe undertake a small volunteering post where you receive minimal income, then you would be eligible for this particular grant. However, if it was the other way around, where you were primarily employed and had a hobby self-employment business, then you wouldn't be eligible for it. You need to still be trading, which probably goes without saying, but in terms of avoiding fraud. So from that perspective, you need to be trading through the 2019-20 tax year, and you would still be trading if it were not for the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. In terms of the government's idea of the income levels, your annual trading profits should be fewer than £50,000. And whilst that might seem a bit harsh, the government believe that they have covered over 95% of sole traders and partnerships with this scheme, which does also make sense because the majority of self-employed people whose profit levels exceed that would in general end up converting to a limited company for tax efficiency reasons. The bit that's a bit woolly at this precise moment in time is that income must be lost as a result of COVID-19. That's the exact wording that they have. What we don't know is to what extent the loss needs to be. So, for example, does it need to be a full shutdown of your business? And people who are perhaps gardeners, cleaners, builders, where they physically need to be present somewhere to undertake the work, that's going to be fairly easy to evidence. However, for those, using us is a bad example because we're a limited company, but accountants, solicitors and the likes, those that provide services where they haven't lost all their customer base, but potentially they may have lost 50% in one go, will they be eligible to claim for it? And we don't know this at this particular stage. In terms of accessing it, the important thing at this stage is to do nothing and really not to contact HMRC at the moment. The reason for that is that they're very busy at the moment. The government have introduced a whole host of schemes. They've only got skeleton staff in their office at the moment. And we have to remember, though it's quite difficult to at times, the reality is they are just individuals like you or I. They have children that they can't take into school. They have families that they're worrying about. So they have other distractions as well. And if you contact them unnecessarily at this stage, you're just going to delay the process of getting this scheme up and running. So effectively, currently, the answer is do nothing. HMRC are going to be checking your eligibility. That's our understanding. And I would imagine what they will do as a starting point is look at your 2018-19 tax return to see whether you meet the criteria and potentially look at previous years. And then they will write to you in order to offer you the chance to apply for the grant. We don't know what's going to be needed for this, but assuming that you make the application and you are eligible, the understanding is that they were going to pay you a lump sum in June 2020. The Chancellor advised that if they can get it up and running sooner than that, they will, but he didn't want to overpromise. And given everything else they've got going on, I would imagine that's kind of your best case scenario. For some people, cash flow wise, that might not help you short term. So it may be that you need to consider some other options. And from that perspective, we'll run through some other options for government assistance later on. In terms of how it's going to work, and I'm going to give you some examples in the next slide or two. What they will use, or what they will do, is they will work out your monthly average profit, and we'll do that in the next slide. Then there will be a grant which will effectively cover 80% of your profits, or £2,500 per month, whichever is lower. Currently, they've said it will be for a period of 3 months. This may be extended in a similar vein to a lot of the other support that's being bandied about at the moment. And as I've just mentioned, it's going to be payable in June, or the likelihood is it will be payable in June in a lump sum. If it does extend, we don't know whether it will then turn into a monthly application process or not. So in terms of how it works, here's an example calculation. So you have your trading profits. What they are going to do in an ideal world is they are going to take your previous 3 years trading profits. So the 2016-17, 2017-18 and 2018-19. In this particular example, that will give you an annual average of 30,469. If you divide that by 12, that gives you your monthly average of 2,539. The grant is going to be the lower of £2,500 and 80% of your £2,539. So therefore, the monthly grant would be £2,031. Now, it's worth pointing out, if you don't have 3 years worth of trading profits, the Chancellor has said they will take what you have. So if you only have 1 year's worth, they will take the average of that particular year to get your monthly average. What we don't know is if you started trading midway through the year, since 2016-17, hypothetically your trading profit for that first year would be lower than another year. My belief is that they're likely to want to allow you to prorata it from the date that you started in order to be fair, but we need some confirmation on that. The other thing to be aware is this particular grant is taxable, so it's going to need to be declared on your tax return. So hypothetically, some element of that particular grant in due course is going to be subject to tax and national insurance. There's also a bit of a technical point in terms of when the income is in relation to and what tax return it will need declaring on, but that's more of a thing for us to worry about, I suppose. So I'm now going to pull up a slide which will give you a rough idea of where you're likely to sit if you are eligible for the grant. So you can see that if your annual average trading profit is in the region of £10,000, your monthly grant amount is likely to be £666.67p, and your lump sum would therefore be £2,000. I've done it in £5,000 increments until we get to £37,500. Effectively, once your trading profit average is in excess of £37,500 up until the £50,000, then at that stage the lump sum will be limited to that £2,500. I'm just going to leave that for just a second longer so that if anybody does want to make any notes of that, they can do. And just to confirm, we will get the slide sent around afterwards. Okay, so I've talked about what we do know about the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. What we haven't talked about particularly yet is what we don't know. As I mentioned, because it's only been announced on Thursday last week, we still have very limited information available to us. So we don't know what the application process is yet. We also, and I've made reference to this, we don't know what's going to be the case if you are indirectly affected by the coronavirus pandemic. So if you have lost income or profit as a result of your clients going out of business or ceasing trading, we don't know how that's going to be evidenced and documented to HMRC. We also don't know if it's an indirect reduction of trade and you're reducing your profit but still trading, whether you're going to be eligible for the grant at all, but also whether you'll be eligible for a reduced amount of grant. The reason I say this is because HMRC the government are trying to be as fair as they can, and potentially some people could end up better off if they were to receive a full grant with only a slightly reduced turnover. We also don't know how long it will go on. So obviously they have announced that for the first 3 months it will be covered, and the Chancellor did say that he would be willing to extend it if required. I would imagine there will be a point at which the budget runs dry for that, so we don't know how long they will be able to cover that for. There's probably plenty of other things that we don't know, but for the moment we'll move on and we'll talk about some other options that for government assistance that we have available. So the first thing that we have available to us, or you guys have available to you, is deferrals of some payments. So the government has announced that there will be a deferral of VAT for any business that had payments due during the period of the 20th of March 2020 through to the 30th of June 2020. This only applies to payments that were due during this period. So if you were effectively late in paying something, maybe it was due on the 7th of March, for example, that VAT payment will still be due. The deferral, and it is only a deferral, that VAT payment will still be due, and it will be due by the end of the 2020-2021 tax year. It's an automatic deferral of the VAT payment, so you don't have to apply for the deferral. I think HMRC have been communicating that they have been cancelling people's direct debits, but it is probably worth, if you do not want it being taken, the payment being taken, to cancel the direct debit. The other thing, as I mentioned, because it is a deferral, if it's something that you can afford to pay, because it is going to fall due eventually, then it is worth making that payment if you can. However, if it's a cash flow perspective and you kind of use that to get through or get by up until the point that you receive your grant, then that's an option that's available to you. The other thing to mention in terms of when we're talking about VAT is that if it's a VAT refund, it will be issued as standard. In terms of income tax, once again, HMRC are deferring the second payment on account, which should have been due on the 31st of July 2020, and it's been deferred to the 31st of January 2021. Now, once again, this is automatic, and for those of you who do have large amounts of self-employment income, then that is something that may well assist if you've already got that money saved up from a cash flow perspective. If the amounts that you've got outstanding to HMRC falls outside the scope of those two particular situations, HMRC have confirmed that there's going to be more leniency with regards to their time to pay requests. However, my understanding is that more evidence is going to be required in order to get them to agree to a time to pay, because they only tend to agree to a time to pay if they think there is a chance they're going to get their money back. And the final thing in terms of deferring payments are loan repayments holidays. So personal mortgage holidays, there is protection from eviction for commercial tenants for 3 months. That particular one is not a rental holiday, it will be due, but landlords can't evict for the next 3 months commercial tenants if they're struggling to pay because of the coronavirus pandemic. Okay, so in terms of other schemes that are available, most of these have been around for a few weeks, so I'm only going to go through these really briefly. If there's any questions, obviously feel free to raise them for discussion at the end, or take it offline with your client relationship manager. So in terms of the cash grant scheme that are available, there is the Small Business Grant Scheme. This is £10,000 grant for those who are eligible for small business rates relief or rural rates relief or tapered rates relief, which effectively means anybody that's got a rateable value of £15,000 or less. They have to have been eligible for it as at the 11th of March 2020. They must occupy a property and be based in England. My understanding is that in terms of those who are based in Staffordshire, Staffordshire County Council, I believe, or Borough Council, have now opened up their applications for this particular grant. So if you think it is something that you're eligible for, I believe they've written to you to let you know. However, I would imagine you're probably not able to access the letters. So feel free to start thinking about making those applications. If you're in the retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, then up to £25,000 cash grant is applicable or is available per property, and that's for those with rateable values of 15,000 through to 51,000. If it falls below the 15,000, it's the cash grant of £10,000 that you'd be eligible to apply for. And those that are based in the retail, hospitality and leisure businesses as well, they will be eligible for rates holidays for the next 12 months. In terms of support for employees, So the government have announced that if you are ill as a result of the coronavirus, then you are eligible as an employee for statutory sick pay from day 1 rather than day 4. Employers can claim 14 days worth of statutory sick pay from the government per employee. Obviously that is only applicable if you are ill. For those who would need to be thinking about making staff redundant as a result of this, there is the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. And you can do this by furloughing employees, which is a term that accountants hadn't really heard about until a few weeks ago. What this means is the government will pay up to £2,500 or 80% of the salary for staff who are furloughed, and currently this will stand for 3 months. In due course, it may be extended. I think it's probably worth mentioning in terms of this, from this perspective, in order to be able to furlough your employees, they must undertake no work for you. I believe they can undertake some training, but they can provide no services or anything that would bring in revenue for you. And please be aware, with this scheme, as well as with other schemes, HMRC will have the ability to audit it at a later date in order to make sure that there is no fraud going on and people aren't unfairly taking advantage of this system. We are looking at running a webinar later in the week in conjunction with Kevin Murphy from Employment Law Solutions. He'll be talking through the HR side of things, because you do have to communicate with any employees that you are furloughing, and we will run through the payroll side and the tax implications of doing this process. So if it's something that interests you, especially if you're on here and not a client, please do just drop us an email and we'll make sure that you get an invite for that webinar once it's set up. In terms of extension of universal credit, additional income is effectively being pumped into it. The system is ridiculously busy at the moment. Last week, I believe there was over 500,000 people applying to get onto that system. But the Chancellor did say it would be possible to claim universal credit and the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. I would imagine there'll be a bit of an interlink as to, if you claim the universal credit, you probably end up getting a reduced grant. But it remains to be seen how this will work. And the business interruption loan schemes, these are now up and running, I believe since Friday last week. In order to get one of these loans or any other type of financing, you are going to need up-to-date information, financial information. You're going to need a business plan that is viable, I believe including steps taken to date to manage the economic downturn. This is something that we obviously can provide support with if you need it. In terms of this particular loan scheme, the government will pay the fees and they'll pay the interest for 12 months. You would remain responsible for 100% of the loan. The general feedback to date, albeit I believe this was prior to Friday, that in general people were finding it really difficult to get lenders who were willing to support in terms of this business interruption loan scheme, and you therefore may find it more simple to get assistance in terms of getting some regular financing options. So in terms of where to now, when we talk to clients, when we come to sign off their accounts and their tax returns at the end of the year, we often like to ask how the business is getting on, and quite often we get the answer, it's really difficult, and we're so busy, haven't got enough time to focus on improving the business and getting more out of the business. Now, for once, some of you may actually have that time to work on rather than in the business, especially if there's not much that you can do during this period of lockdown. Perhaps you might be able to make the most of this particular situation and take on some novel opportunities for you to use your skills whilst you're on lockdown. In terms of that, as an example, we do have a client who transports a particular material that is no longer considered key and essential, and therefore that element of their business has pretty much ceased during this period of lockdown. However, because they have something that can transport materials. I believe they're now going to get involved in transporting medical equipment and oxygen for the NHS. So you may find, and this won't apply in all circumstances, but you may find that there is something that you can do in order to continue to trade whilst we're in this period of lockdown. For those who really can't carry on at this precise moment, then it's possible to do some planning for when you return. I believe there's a risk if you simply stop what you're doing, down tools, have a bit of a break, that when you get back up and running and you start planning to promote yourself at that stage, that other competitors may have gotten in there first and stolen a number of your clients. So I think there's some planning that you can do if you're brave enough to do it. I think the other thing is, if you're sitting around with not a lot to do and you're physically healthy, I suppose there is always the option of volunteering or getting some temporary work at places that do need that support, for example supermarkets or the NHS providing support to the vulnerable. As I mentioned earlier on, in terms of how we can help, in order for our business to keep going, we need clients that are going to keep going through this. So we want to help, guide and support wherever possible. We would love to do it all for nothing, but we do have 16 members of the team, and we want to be able to continue paying them to continue providing you with the level of service that you need. So we're not looking to profiteer from it, and we will be offering the best possible rates that we can during this difficult time to provide information for you and to provide you with whatever we can to help you get through this. So in terms of what we can do to help, up until a short while before, so when I logged on, I believe everybody that was logged on today is a client. If anybody has logged on since that is not a client, please feel free to speak to your accountant to see what support they can offer. I think it's really important to get some support from professionals at this stage to help you through what is unprecedented and difficult in terms of at the moment. If your accountant is not in a position to support, we're perfectly happy and willing to have chats with you to see if we can help you too. So in terms of what we think we can do to help at the moment, we can assist with the calculations that are going to be needed for the necessary applications for Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, any grants and financing that you may need to apply for. In terms of those who need up-to-date management accounts for it, and who aren't currently on a cloud-based accounting package, this is where a package like Xero, Free Agent, QuickBooks, Sage, anything like that could really help you. And actually, once again, if cash permits and you're offline during this time, it really could be a good time for you to do a bit of investigation in terms of what package might work best for you going forward. Once again, we're happy to have conversations about which would be the best package for you and talk through options for you on this. We can assist with applying to HMRC in terms of the job retention scheme, the furloughing process, even for those who do their own payroll if needs be. And once again, as a reminder, we will be doing a webinar later in the week. As I mentioned, I don't think any clients this particularly applies to, but if you do know anybody who needs a tax return filing by the 23rd of April, we still have got a capacity to get this done for them. From that perspective, I think basically if you're not already registered with HMRC, you've probably missed the window. And I think from the government's perspective, that was what they were after. They were after preventing people registering purely to declare self-employment income for the 18-19 tax year. And then in terms of other things that we can do to support, we will be running another webinar. That the hope is that Rupert is going to be doing this. So it's likely to be either later this week or early next week in terms of continuity business planning. As I say, we're obviously been doing this ourselves, but especially if you've got a team of people and you want to make plans to get through this difficult time and come out the other end stronger, then we can assist you with that. And then for those who are likely to have cash flow issues, we can help with planning for cash flow too. So I think that's everything that I've got at the moment. So I think it's now, she says, failing slightly, but it's now on to the question and answer section. So I'm just going to unmute Sally.
Can you hear me, Laura?
I can indeed, yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm hoping you all can't see me in the sort of size that I've got in front of my screen. Thank you very much, Laura. I know there was an awful lot of information to take in there. And as Laura said, we will circulate the slides to you and a summary of the responses to the questions that we received. And we have received quite a number, but before I do that, I just want to put in a point around that Laura didn't mention. It's really, really important to remember that although any VAT liability will be deferred, you have to actually submit your VAT return. You cannot just not do the VAT return, otherwise you will be in hot water with HMRC. So get your VAT return submitted, and then it's up to you whether you allow the deferral or whether you pay the liability. The other thing is, it is Stafford Borough Council that will be, and I believe that their website has opened this morning in terms of applications for the small business relief rates relief. And so I'm going to throw the first question over, and it's important that I say that you will not be able to see Edith and Andrew on video. We do have a very nice picture of Edith showing. Andrew, I think, has decided he doesn't want everybody to see his beautiful face, so you've just got a black screen. But I can tell you he's a very handsome chap. So Edith, if I can throw the first question to you, please. It's from Jamie, and he wants to know, where do workers on zero contracts fit within the government scheme? Are you there, Edith?
Oh, apparently I have to unmute her. Sorry, I have unmuted.
Thank you, Laura. I was there going, don't know how to get Laura's attention. So what was the question again, Sally? Sorry.
So it's from Jamie. It's, where do workers on zero contracts fit within the government scheme?
Okay, so 0-hour contracts, they can still be furloughed. It's going to be based on that average earnings over the last tax year. So from April 2019 to March 2020. So they're still entitled to be furloughed, and it'll be based on that averaged earnings. If they've only started partway through the tax year, it will still be based on that average during that tax year, as opposed to if they've only worked for 3 months and it being spread over 12, it'll still be spread over the 3 months they've worked.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I also have one here, and I'm going to direct that to Andrew. It comes from Chris, and the question is, I have 2 businesses. Are both eligible for grant help? And are both partners in a partnership eligible for help?
The partners ones are going to be based on their own individual circumstances. So each partner will be assessed on the self-employment profits that they've declared on their self-assessment tax returns. So each one would have to be looked in as individuals as opposed to the partnership. And having 2 businesses, in theory, both would be eligible in some form. You would, if they're both self-employments, then you would add the 2 figures together to get your total self-employment figure for today's topic. Or alternatively, if one's a self-employment and one's through a limited company, the limited company grants and reliefs will be discussed more tomorrow.
Lovely, thank you. And if I can stay with you, Andrew, I have a question from Simon. Simon's asked, can I include the 1920 tax year to be taken into account? And a second point from Simon as well, how will HMRC deal with the 3 years when it was split between some of that time being on PAYE and some of it being on self-employed income?
I think the important thing from our point of view at the moment is that HMRC will effectively tell you if you're eligible for it. At some point, hopefully in June or before June, then they will ask you to apply if they think you're eligible. We're not too sure yet on whether the employment and the self-employment will factor in, but as far as we aware with current rules, it'll be based on the self-employment figures that you've declared, not the employment figures, because you are continuing your self-employment. Your employment is either stopped or you'll be through the job retention scheme that was mentioned earlier on. The first question again, Sally, sorry?
The first one was, can I include the 1920 tax year to be taken into account for this consideration?
At the minute, unfortunately not. A lot of what the government have done is based on things that have happened historically. So the job retention scheme is based on your salary or wages up to the end of February or beforehand. The rates, holiday and other things mentioned earlier on was the 11th of March. It's all historical. Very little of this will be forward thinking. So unfortunately, at the minute, it doesn't look like 1920s figures will be included in that calculation.
I think in terms of 1920s figures, it's quite, because it's already been announced, there would be the risk of people fraudulently declaring this a whole bunch of additional income just to try and get that relief. I think that's why they're shutting things off at this precise moment. But I suppose if it does go on for quite a period of time, there is always the possibility that longer term they might well open that up. Sorry, Andrew.
Thank you. Edith, if I can come to you again, from Mike. I note the furlough period is a minimum of 3 weeks. Do these have to be consecutive weeks, or can they be spread across a period of time?
Do I need to unmute again?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've just unmuted you, Edith.
There we go. Sorry guys, technical difficulties. In terms of the furloughing period, there is a minimum 3 week turnaround, a 3 week furlough period. It is a continuous time frame on there, and it's designed, from what I understand, to allow people having to move from being furloughed to current workers to cover any workforce shortages due to COVID-19. So it does need to be continuous. After the 3 weeks, you can become employed again as a non-furloughed worker, and then be re-furloughed again if needs be at a future date.
Thank you. If I can once again go to Andrew on this, I've got a question from Andrew. It says, my self-assessment tax return identified a loss to the end of March 2019 of, I won't put the figure in, I'll just say X, for a trading period of 151 days. What, if anything, can I apply for?
Yeah, so this, what they've mentioned with this current scheme is that it's based on trading profits, and they don't mention anything about trading losses. If it's for a shorter period, I assume that it's the first year of self-employment, and therefore there are no other historical years that can go back up to those 3 years to look at on an average. Therefore, at the moment, it doesn't look like you can claim anything under this particular scheme. Under all the schemes that I'm thinking off the top of my head, the only one that springs to mind would be something like universal credit, which is effectively job seekers allowance, which I know that they're being a lot more supportive of with COVID-19. So that would probably be the one thing you could apply for, but I don't think that anything through this current self-employment grant funding you'll be able to get anything for.
Thank you. Edith, I only started trading, this is from Sophie, I only started trading in October 2019. Can I still apply for the self-employment income support?
Unfortunately, Sophie, at this time, as Laura's touched on already, it's not available for people that have started trading after the 5th of April 2019. So as my colleague Andrew's just mentioned, it'll be unfortunately applying for the universal credit systems. We're not sure, as Laura said, whether they'll change that system in the future, but right now they're trying to prevent fraud, so they're stopping people from being able to do it for the 1920 tax year.
And Edith, if I can stay with you again, I've got Bethany a question, and thank you, Bethany, for your very kind comments about how helpful this has been. That's really good to know. The question is, I'm self-employed and have been on payroll for the last 19 months. My employer made me redundant 2 weeks ago. If they were willing to, would I be eligible for the furlough scheme despite not being PAYE?
So this is a topic that's being strongly debated at the moment. If anyone's really following Martin Lewis from Money Saving Expert, he's doing quite a lot about this. It's one of those grey areas. A lot of places, if you've been made redundant, you should go to them and request to be furloughed. And HMRC have stipulated if you were made redundant because of COVID-19, you can backdate and be furloughed, because a lot of places were making the redundancy before the furloughing option was made available to everybody. It's not guaranteed that they will, which is why it's causing a bit of an outrage on, oh, hello, Sally.
No, it's all right. I was just sending Rupert out of the room. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I thought you were trying to tell me I was saying something that you knew different to.
No,
Apologies.
sorry. I was just directing him out of the room.
Sorry, guys. So it's a case that you can request it if it's down to COVID-19, because that's the whole reason why there's furloughed options available, but it's not guaranteed. But I'm just reading here, despite not being PAYE. Is that because you're no longer PAYE because you're now redundant?
I think in this particular instance, no, Bethany, I think it's because she's self-employed.
Right, okay, so this furloughing scheme for PAYE is only for PAYE, so people on a payroll, as opposed to being self-employed, working as a subcontractor or just as freelancing. It's the furloughing option for PAYE is only people with employment contracts.
So I think realistically, Bethany, from your particular situation, you'd be looking at your self-employment income support scheme.
Sorry, if Bethany's been submitting tax returns,
she has.
So in theory, as long as you haven't put on the 18-19 tax return that you ceased self-employment, you should still be able to utilise the self-employment scheme that's available.
Can I suggest that one goes offline, and then you can have a direct conversation about that? Okay. Andrew, Chris has asked, a friend of mine had to dissolve a well-established business recently and has since set up a new limited company. Will the 3-year tax rule apply, and does this mean he will not qualify for help?
Right, got to me. Sorry. Apologies.
Thanks, Laura. So a well-established business recently. The problem is with this self-employment income support scheme, it's twofold in that your intention is to continue to trade in the 2021 tax year, and you've lost trading or partnership profits as a result of COVID-19. If he has stopped his well-established business, which I'm assuming was self-employment income, neither of those two apply. Therefore, I wouldn't say that any claim would be successful under this scheme. If he set up a new limited company, there are potentially things with directors that he could do, but I don't think the 3-year tax rule applies for him currently on his old business, unfortunately.
That's how I'd read it, not that I'm the accountant. Chris, what might be worthwhile is you perhaps referring your friend to join the limited company webinar tomorrow. And then the final question, unless anybody comes in, and it's been great to have so many questions, if I can direct this to Edith, it's come from Sam. Can you still work and claim self-employment payment?
This is an area that has caused a bit of confusion, because from what we understand, and Laura, if you could unmute Andrew, because I think he knows a little bit about this as well.
I didn't mute him in the first place, but I shall unmute him again anyway.
From what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, which is why I've asked you to be unmuted. From what we understand from the Chancellor's announcement, is that you can claim the self-employment grant as such, but you can still work at the same time. Now, we're still waiting for clarification on that because I've not read anywhere for definite, but he did make that in his announcement, but it seems to be different to how employees work, so we're not sure if it's a misunderstanding. Andrew, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, in his on Thursday, it's 5 o'clock daily update on it, he did mention that you should be able to continue to work, but with a lot of these, what they say in the daily updates and then how it's actually applied are sometimes two very different things. I think the thing on that one is to wait until we find out a little more details about it, until the government release more concrete evidence either way. I would suggest that using what he said was true, and there's nothing to say that you can't. So in theory, at the minute, I would say it's okay, but I would reserve that with a let's wait until government release more details on it.
Okay, thank you. And we have had one further question. I'll direct this to you, Andrew. It's from Sue. Is it possible to apply for the business grant today?
Unfortunately not. This is going to be something that the revenue have to build a lot of systems behind a lot of these new schemes that they're building. For instance, the job retention, the employment one, that's happening at some point in April. This is hopefully going to be in June or beforehand. They're certainly hoping to get it done in June. There'll only be one business grant, and HMRC will be the first ones, as Laura said, to contact you to say if they think you're eligible. It will be, at the very best, I would say, end of May, beginning of June before you hear anything about that, which is why potentially getting some sort of cash flow advantage over the next 8 weeks is going to be preferred over anything else. But unfortunately, no way of getting the grant as of today.
Thank you. And then finally, Stephen, I'm hoping that Laura hit the record button on this webinar. I was supposed to remind her at the beginning. So will you be able to download this meeting? Yes, if I understood what that meant, I could tell you for definite whether that was possible. I believe that it will be available. The technologies of it just go over my head, but we will be in touch with everyone with the download of the slides, the recording, if that's been done, and the response to those questions, which I think you can see that questions might actually suddenly appear to one person, but the response is relevant to many. And that's why these webinars give us the opportunity to talk to a lot of you in one go. And you all have the same concerns as we do as a business. We totally understand the challenges you're currently facing. So please be assured we're here. We'll do as much as we can to help you and guide you through the complexities that no doubt will evolve in the coming weeks. As Laura said at the outset, this is the first of a series of webinars. It's important, if you know of anybody else that might find the one tomorrow on limited companies useful, we'll also send out an invite to the one that will be in alignment of Carthy Accountants and Kevin Murphy of Employment Law Solutions, because he will be able to advise on the HR, the legality of the furloughing scheme. And then we will be working on the sort of the next stage, which is the business planning, the business continuity, etc. We do need Rupert's support with that, but as I say, it's untimely that he's out of the business at this moment in time, but I guess it's he's a casualty of what we're going through at the moment. So yeah, if you can just bear with us on that one, but we're going to get that pulled together hopefully by the end of the week. The other thing to bear in mind, we will be featuring heavily on our social media pages as much information we can as quickly as it is released. So that's on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. So keep following us on those, and then we will do blanket emails to clients targeting where we can. It's sometimes quite difficult to decipher who needs what, so we are apologising but not apologising for bombarding you unusually with emails. And so if you keep an eye on that, we will keep you appraised as much as we can. The only thing left for me to say, I don't know if Laura you have anything else to say.
I don't think so. I suppose that if you do think of anything that you forgot to ask, feel free to drop any of us excuse me, feel free to drop any of us a message. if you are clients, as a starting point, please would you contact your client relationship manager, or if you have bookkeeping work or something undertaken, whoever is your main point of contact. For non-clients, if you did have any questions, please feel free to email our client services email address as a starting point, which is hopefully on your screen now.
Okay, finally, before my final point, we've just had another question come in from Mark. Hi Laura, how do I access my 2016-17 accounts? Mark will be able, sorry, go on.
I was going to say we can get that emailed across to you. We won't include that in the handout, but that's fine. we can get that sent across to you, as long as you were, just to clarify, as long as you were self-employed during the 2016-17 tax year, and as long as we did your 16-17 tax return, which I think
I'll take that offline, Laura.
Yes.
And then the final point, and within the hour, so shows we've got good time management as well. What I would, do more questions. Hang on. I'm really struggling. Right. Chris, in terms of getting in touch in the future, what contact details should we use? Basically, you can use client services, which is sort of one of the team will direct it. I know in the past you've tended to see Rupert, but you could contact Vicky Miles on vicky.miles at Carthy Counties, but any problems you can always come direct to me. I think you have got my direct email address as well. And the other one was just somebody apologising for leaving the meeting. So my final point is, if you do have any feedback that immediately springs to mind once you go off this meeting, if you could drop us a quick email, it will really help us as we prepare for tomorrow's webinar. As I say, this is the first time we've done it. We hope you've gained as much from it as we wanted you to. But if you could drop us an email, I've got a few people coming on now saying thank you, great, really useful, many thanks. We're just trying to garner as much information as we can as we start to prepare the second and third and fourth, etc., etc. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe in the current situation, health-wise, and obviously our thoughts are with you business-wise as well. Many thanks to you and to the team for answering all those questions, and Laura for the presentation. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.